Your brain is one of the most amazing pieces of machinery on Earth. Taking up an astounding 20% of the energy you use up in your body, the brain is the central hub of everything you do and are. Everything that makes up the brain, from the neurons to the cerebellum, is important and needs to be running at full capacity in order to work properly. There's a lot of danger out there in the wide world, and as scary as it may seem, don't worry. Your body has plenty of defenses and backup strategies that can keep its most important organ running. You have a hard skull, reflexes, and hormones that keep you aware when there's danger nearby. Still, there can be some issues that cause your head to take more of a beating than is usually expected. When the brain itself is injured, there can be a multitude of different effects, and knowing what happens can be confusing. Luckily, this is our topic today on this episode of Stuff You've Probably Wondered. Because my singular source of this subject was the Brain Injury Association of America, I'm using the advice and information they give on this topic directly from their website. Before we can get to that though, let's talk about trauma in the general sense. When any sort of trauma happens, we can usually look at it on the cellular level. But the way brain cells are arranged and shaped actually has absolutely everything to do with the functioning of the brain. These cells, or neurons, are split up into three sections: the cell body, the axon, and the axon terminal. The axon terminals look like roots on a plant and send electrochemical signals to nearby neurons. The axon is this public pool divider looking thing that carries the message to the center of the cell. And the cell body has these little branchy things called dendrites which conduct electricity and receive messages from other neurons in the brain. You may be wondering why the anatomy of these cells is so important, but in the event of a brain injury, if these cells are torn or stretched, if they are too far apart for the electrical signals to jump from one cell to the other, massive consequences can come from that cause some serious trouble for our friend the brain. So let's move on now to what kinds of trauma can occur. Your brain is very delicate, being made out of soft, stringy material and coated in a goop called cerebral spinal fluid. Any injury that involves the brain after you've been born is called TBI, or traumatic brain injury. TBI accounts for an extremely wide range of possible accidents occurring up there in your noggin, so to simplify things, I'm going to cover the three most common. When each of these occur, the brain is basically moving in a way it's not supposed to, such as rotating, impacting, etc. The first type of TBI is one you've probably heard of, the concussion. A concussion is when you and your brain have impacted with something or have suddenly gone too fast too quickly. This can include collisions to the head, whiplash of some kind, or even gunshot wounds. As a result, the nerves in your cranium are damaged, the blood vessels both there and in your brain stretch, and sometimes there will be diffuse axonal injury, which we'll get to shortly. Concussions can be nasty, but also hard to diagnose because there may not be a visible injury and CT and MRI tests can't pick them up. The only way doctors have to determine if you have a concussion is through your symptoms, and even those are extremely various. Some of these include dizziness, headaches, blurred vision, nausea, vomiting, slurred speech, and ringing of the ears, with a whole lot of other things that you can find on the BIA-USA's website. The second of our three scenarios is a Coup-Contrecoup injury. Like concussions, they are the result of your brain impacting with the inside of your skull or twisting in an unnatural way. The difference is that the impact is so severe that the brain will slam into one side of your skull, then whiplash will cause a second concussion on the other side. In this case, there may be contusions that develop, which are visible bruises or bleeding on the brain, and these contusions can be surgically removed if necessary. Finally, the third type of common TBI is diffuse axonal injury. This is the most severe of the three because when it occurs, the brain is either violently shaken or rotated too much and lags behind the rest of the head. As a result, there is a lot of tearing of the brain tissue, and depending on the severity of the injury, can cause comas or death. Still, because the brain controls so many different functions of the body, the placement of the tears will decide which functions are impaired. All of these injuries may seem scary, but they really are serious and should be taken as such. Most TBIs are caused by falls, impacts, especially in sports, and car accidents, so the risk is always there. But the Brain Injury Association has a few pieces of advice that you can take should you or someone else find themselves with a TBI. First, you should know about the Glasgow Coma Scale, which determines how severe one of the injuries is. With its three segments of eye, verbal response, and motor response, you rate what the victim's reactions are, then add the three together. A score of 13 to 15 is a normally healthy person with minor injuries, a score of 9 to 12 is a moderate injury, and a score of 8 and below being considered severe, with the lowest of 3 being deep coma or death. The BIA-USA also suggests to treat TBIs mostly like any other physical injury. Get lots of rest and don't rush. Make sure you know whether you are able to ride a bike, drive a car, or operate machinery, and, exclusively to TBIs, keep a journal of things to remember if your memory becomes less than normal. It may seem like a demeaning task, but keep in mind that injury should always be taken seriously and with care so you can go back to being your regular, awesome self again. Thanks for watching, and as always, if you have any questions you want me to answer or have an original song you'd like me to put in the background of a future video, leave it in the comments or email me at stuffyouprobably.wondered@gmail.com. Also in the comments, share with everyone about a TBI you or someone you know had. What other tips can you give to help the process along? In addition, I'd like to apologize for my over year-long absence from YouTube. Life gets in the way, as I'm sure many of you watching can attest. I love making these videos and love sharing my knowledge with the world. Starting this month, I'm going to try to put up a video once a month, so those of you who are still wondering out there can still get the content you want at a reasonable pace. Until then, I'll see you next time, hopefully sooner, on Stuff You Probably Wondered.